Would Japan really step in to stop a Chinese attack on Taiwan? In recent weeks, tensions have been growing in East Asia following claims by Japan's new Prime Minister that her country would be willing to intervene militarily if Beijing invaded the island. But while Tokyo insists it's simply clarifying its position amidst an increasingly dangerous regional environment, the statement has caused fury in China, which has already begun retaliating diplomatically and economically. But with tensions now growing, is Japan genuinely willing to step in to protect Taiwan if it were to be attacked? Or is this largely a symbolic gesture designed to try to deter a Chinese intervention in the first place? Hello and welcome. My name is James Ker-Lindsay, and here I take an informed look at international relations, conflict and security. In international relations, deterrence theory rests on a simple premise. A state can prevent another actor from taking a particular action by convincing it that the costs will outweigh the benefits. However, for this to work, the deterring state must not only have the capacity to inflict unacceptable losses, but it must also signal clearly that it has the resolve to do so. In other words, the threat must be credible. A good case in point is Japan's recent remarks on Taiwan. By declaring that a Chinese assault on the island could constitute a grave threat to Japan's own security, Tokyo has signalled that the consequences of attacking the island may be wider than Beijing anticipates. But the effectiveness of this message depends on whether China actually believes that Japan is genuinely prepared to act. The question, therefore, is whether Japan has the means and political will to intervene if a Taiwan conflict erupts, and if not, why exactly has it made this statement? China and Japan lie in East Asia. While China is a large continental country with coastlines on the East Asia Sea, the South China Sea and the Pacific Ocean, Japan is an archipelago off the east coast of the Asian mainland, stretching from the northern island of Hokkaido to Okinawa in the south. The difference in scale is massive. China covers roughly 9.4 million square kilometres, or around 3.6 million square miles, while Japan occupies just under 380,000 square kilometres, or around 150,000 square miles. In terms of population, China has roughly 1.4 billion inhabitants, compared to Japan's ageing and shrinking population of around 125 million. Economically, although Japan remains twice as wealthy as China on a per capita basis, it's now much smaller in absolute terms, as China's overall economy is now 4 to 5 times that of Japan's. As for Taiwan, although the nearest Japanese territory is just 110 kilometres or 70 miles away, the closest of the 4 main Japanese islands, Kyushu, is around 1,300 kilometres or 800 miles to its northeast. In contrast, mainland China is around 140 kilometres or 90 miles west of Taiwan. In every way, therefore, China would appear to be in a dominant position in the event of a conflict over Taiwan. So, given this, what exactly lies behind the current remarks? While Japan and China have a long history of trade, diplomacy, culture and occasional conflicts, our story begins in the late 19th century. After Japan defeated China in the First Sino-Japanese War in 1895, it gained control of Taiwan, which became its first overseas colony. But while this would lead to rapid economic modernisation with the development of infrastructure and industries, the period was also marked by harsh repression and forced assimilation. This would last until Japan's defeat at the end of the Second World War, when Taiwan returned to Chinese rule, which was then in the midst of a bitter civil war. However, when this conflict ended in 1949 with the final victory of the Chinese Communist Party, which established the People's Republic of China, the defeated nationalist government retreated to Taiwan. From there, the nationalist government, which claimed to represent the Republic of China, continued to be generally recognised by much of the international community, including Japan, as the legitimate administration of all of China. However, by the early 1970s, things were changing. After the decision to switch the Chinese seat at the United Nations to the People's Republic of China in 1971, Tokyo transferred its recognition from Taiwan to Beijing the following year. But while Japan established diplomatic relations with the People's Republic and formally recognised its claim to Taiwan under the so-called One China policy, it continued to maintain close economic, cultural and social ties with Taiwan, even as mainland China became one of its most important trade partners. But while Japan long tried to balance relations between China and Taiwan, over the decades that followed, the strategic environment in East Asia shifted dramatically, especially following the turn of the millennium. China's rapid military modernisation, coupled with its growing maritime claims and its increasingly forceful rhetoric over Taiwan, has alarmed Japan. Given Taiwan's proximity to key southern Japanese islands, as well as to major sea lanes, many fear that if China were to take Taiwan, it could alter the regional balance of power and threaten the rest of Japan. Indeed, many Japanese policymakers now see Taiwan's fate as directly connected to Japan's national security. And it's this that lies at the heart of the growing tensions between Beijing and Tokyo. In early November 2025, Japan's new Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi stated that a Chinese attack on Taiwan could force Japan to respond militarily. Drawing on Japan's security laws, which were amended in 2015 to permit the country to use force not only to defend its own territory, but also to protect allies or partners if Japan's survival was at risk, the decision has provoked outrage in Beijing. Accusing Tokyo of interfering in China's internal affairs, the Chinese Foreign Ministry summoned Japan's ambassador to lodge a formal protest about the comments. On top of this, Beijing has also announced a series of retaliatory measures. In addition to cancelling high-level diplomatic meetings, it's implemented economic sanctions in what many now fear could be the start of a new era of volatility between the two countries. I hope you're finding this useful. If so, please consider giving it a like and perhaps subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. It all really helps. Thanks so much. And now, back to the video. Of course, all this raises several crucial questions. First of all, could Japan actually step in if an attack occurred? While Japan's self-defense forces are capable and technologically advanced, and its Navy and Air Force possess some of the most sophisticated weaponry in the region, its military posture has traditionally been defensive. Analysts note it lacks the large-scale amphibious capabilities needed to engage in a major conflict over Taiwan. More importantly, China's military power has increased substantially. It now has the world's largest naval fleet and extensive missile capabilities. In addition, its proximity to Taiwan provides significant logistical advantages. Any Japanese intervention would therefore require extensive military force against a much larger and better resourced adversary. If Japan were to take action, it would almost certainly need to coordinate with the United States, assuming, of course, that the Trump administration would indeed step in as well. But even then, the risks would remain substantial, especially given that China is not only a significant military actor, but is also a major nuclear power. Given these constraints, the next obvious question is what exactly lies behind the Japanese Prime Minister's comments. In fact, there are three main strands of thought. The first interpretation is that Japan is simply engaging in direct deterrence signalling. By raising the possibility of intervention, Tokyo is trying to complicate China's calculations and discourage it from considering a military strike on Taiwan. Even if Japan can't decisively alter the military balance on its own, it can still add to the broader economic, political, diplomatic, and even military uncertainty surrounding any attack and substantially increase the potential costs of Chinese action. The second view is that the comments were in fact directed at an internal Japanese audience. While many Japanese oppose taking a stronger position on Taiwan, fearing it could make Japan a direct target with potentially devastating consequences, the Japanese leader may well be responding to domestic political pressure from the more hawkish side of the political divide. Taking a firmer line on China is popular in some quarters and may be designed to strengthen the government's image at home. Thirdly, there's also an international dimension. Japan's statements may be designed to shore up US resolve over Taiwan by signalling that if anything were to happen, then Washington would have support. Likewise, at a time when Trump has complained that allies aren't doing enough to defend themselves, this may be Tokyo's way of signalling its willingness to shoulder more responsibility for East Asian regional security. But regardless of the exact reasoning, the effectiveness of such signalling is certainly open to question. Deterrence relies on credibility, which requires both military capabilities and political resolve. While Japan may have the political will to act, it doesn't seem to possess the military strength to do so. If China believes that Japan is unable to pose a serious threat in the event of an attack on Taiwan, the deterrent effect is obviously undermined. In this vein, Tokyo's apparent moves to backtrack on the comments will only have made matters worse. Aside from suggesting weakness, if Beijing sees Japan's statements as a political provocation rather than military deterrence, this will just increase tensions rather than calm the situation, especially given Japan's historic links to Taiwan. In the meantime, Japan's suggestion that it could step in to defend Taiwan highlights the increasingly fragile balance of power in East Asia. While Tokyo, like many others, fears China's rise and the possibility of conflict in the Taiwan Strait, it seems increasingly powerless to do anything about it. While Japan clearly wants to deter China and reassure its allies of its commitment to act if armed conflict were to erupt, this will only matter if Japan can build the capabilities necessary to make its deterrence credible. But then, of course, the worry is that this will provoke an arms race, thus making the situation even more unstable. I hope you found this useful. If so, here are some more videos that you might find helpful. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in the next video.